Alrighty, hey, let's bring in Tamatha Paul from the Greens Justice spokesperson. Tamatha Paul joins us right now. Kia ora, good evening to you, Tamatha.
Kia ora, Pat. Kia ora, Chewy. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Yeah, not bad.
Where are you at the moment? You're in Parliament, are you?
Yeah, I'm in my office right now.
Oh, nice. Very good. Hey, now you are the Justice spokesperson for the Greens. We want to have a talk to you about the facts and figures that we saw being put out today. I think what we'll do to start the conversation is I want to go to breakfast and I want to play a little bit of the conversation that was had this morning. We're not going to do all of the clips with you, Tamatha, because your time is more valuable than ours. So we'll do the first clip, because in this first clip, basically Daniel Faitaua asks the Prime Minister about why these stats are bad and why is he blaming Labour for them. So let's have a look at this, and then we'll be back and we'd love to get your thoughts around the whole crime stats situation at the moment. Tamatha, you know, what's accurate, what's been exaggerated, what should we be doing, where to from here? Here's the Prime Minister, Daniel Faitaua, from this morning.
Listen, if violent crime is up under your watch, how is it Labour's fault?
Oh, look, I'm not actually interested whose fault it is. What we use here is a violent.
Sorry to interrupt so quickly, but it's a new position from this Prime Minister, because when he was in opposition, he was very keen to identify whose fault it was for violent crime. But now, not so much, because, you know, he's a pragmatist and he just wants to solve the problem. So he's growing. We all are.
Oh, look, I'm not actually interested whose fault it is. What we use here is a measure of violent crime, which is over a 2-year survey. And essentially what we're saying is, look, it's up to 30,000 more people. We actually want it to go the other way, to have 20,000 less people impacted by violent crime. And that's why we're doing everything we can to actually do a series of things to make sure that we crack down on it.
You always say that the previous government was soft on crime. Just what tangible Labour policy can you point to? Well, can you point to us tangible Labour policy was there that showed that they were soft on criminal?
Yeah, so essentially, as I said before, you had a government right from the top that was soft on crime. The only crime target, frankly, was a 30% reduction in the prison population. We'd love to see that, of course, if there was a 30% reduction in crime. Sadly, over that 6-year period, we saw more violent crime, more retail crime, more ram raids, more gang membership. What we measure here, Daniel, just so that you know, is that, you know, what I've said is, look, there are things that the New Zealand people want us to do as a new government around the economy, around law and order, around better public services.
Yes,
and we've chosen 9 key measures that we're actually going to measure.
What policy exactly? It's what policy?
Yeah. Well, as you can see, we've toughened up sentencing laws. We've got really tough gang laws that now have just been passed. We've got work on serious.
I think he might have a communication problem with his earpiece, Chewy. I don't think he's hearing the question for some reason, because he sure as hell ain't answering it.
Young offenders as a category for judges to use. We've got our military-style academies up and running with a pilot. We've got rid of Section 27 reports. We've got third strikes coming back in. There's a whole we've got 500 more police officers. We've got 800 more prison beds coming. We've got 700 more corrections officers coming. So, you know, those are the things that we've done in the last 10 months to make sure that we have a full-scale approach to making sure we lower crime and restore law and order in New Zealand. But again, you know, what we're doing here is we've set a 6-year goal. We're going to report on it every quarter. Some quarters, you know, things at the moment have been going the wrong way, and we need to.
In case you weren't aware, Chewy, they're going to win the next term. You know, we're always thinking, is this going to be a one-term government? But he's just said they have a 6-year plan. So apparently they've won the next election already. So yeah, I mean, it does give us a Saturday afternoon off, I guess, in about 2.5 years, doesn't it? So, you know, little mercies.
To be able to pull them back down. We've had other things in our targets like emergency housing be very, very positive and actually get better results, getting people out of motels into permanent houses. But that's okay. What's more important is, what are we going to do about it? What are we changing given what we've been doing isn't working? That's the conversation that we're having with ministers and government agencies.
And what
are we going to do about it? And I guess, Tamatha, thank you for joining us this evening. That's where we're going to come to you. You're welcome just to respond to anything you've heard there. And what are we going to do about it?
Kia ora, Pat. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think the main thing that I think when I look at the suite of justice policies that the government has is they're actually treating law and order, and they're actually treating lawmaking as a marketing exercise, because all of the things that he just named changes to sentencing, gang policies, all of those changes, that long list, almost all of them fly in the face of evidence. All of the evidence that was collected over the years that says putting people into prison does not make our communities any safer, and it, in fact, exacerbates existing problems. It completely ignores that. It ignores all of the evidence around gang membership, why people join gangs in the first place, what the drivers are, and how the gang policies that have been introduced will not drive down gang membership at all. And the list goes on and on. So that's the problem, is their law and order strategy is dedicated towards getting more votes and pleasing people who feel that they're not safe, I guess, who want to see punishment of people in general. But the problem is that responding with punishing people by locking them up and having harsher sentences, and getting them into that prison system, building mega prisons, does not work, never has worked, and the evidence shows that. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I guess the overarching thing is that none of it is grounded in evidence. None of it is grounded in the reality as to why people commit crimes or what people take into consideration when they do commit crime. And none of it addresses the drivers of crime, which we know are a lot of things, but to mention one thing, poverty is a huge driver of crime. Lack of access to good public health care. All you need to do is have a look at who's in prison, which is majority Māori, majority people with disabilities, and majority of people who have had experienced a lot of trauma in their life. Prisons are just not the answer to helping people to reflect on their actions, change their behaviour, come back out into the community as they inevitably do, as 99% of people that end up in prison do, and not create any further harm.
If we have a look at the actual stats and facts and figures that they were talking about today, do you have any comment on they were aiming to have 20,000 fewer violent offenders? There's been 30,000 more. Do you have any opinion on that based around like this current government versus an overlag from the last government? Is it an anomaly? Do you think this is evidence of their, because I mean, like you're just saying, if you hit vulnerable people, if you hit poor people and make them more vulnerable and poorer, crime goes up. Are we seeing a result of that in these crime stats, or is it still a lag from the previous government, or how do we address that?
Well, I think the problem is that, first of all, they've cherry-picked an example or found some statistics that make their approach look good, but the problem is it's simply displacing crime rather than addressing it and stopping it and reducing offending. And that is their whole approach to law and order, is they think that by locking people up and winding them into the criminal justice system, that they're somehow containing the issue. But what they're actually doing is displacing it, because if someone has, say, let's use an example of violent crime, if somebody has done that and then they're sent to prison for longer times, due to the sentencing rules, that doesn't address the behaviour at all. It just simply moves it. And then you have violence that happens within the prison, violence towards corrections officers, and vice versa. It's just simply trying to contain the issue. The problem with that is, as a country, we've decided that we're not going to do capital punishment, right? The problem is you can't keep people in prison forever, and prison is touted to be this opportunity where people go in and they're able to get the rehabilitation they need to address their offending. The problem is that's not what happens. Prisons are terrible, hostile places where people in prison have virtually no rights. And their minimum entitlements, the things like exercise, sunlight, human contact, food during the day has regularly been exposed by the Ombudsman, as our New Zealand prisons completely violate people in prison's rights, human rights. It's an awful place, and it entrenches the mindset that violence is an acceptable way to navigate the world. It increases hostility. It just makes people more angry. And then when they come out, that anger often plays out in reoffending and more future victims being created. Yeah. And I don't want to defend Labour and their approach to crime, because I have some disagreements with some of their approaches too. And I think they did some good stuff in terms of the prison population reduction targets. But there was also some other concerning policies that they had that leaned into the same logic that this current government is using, like the RAM rates bill, for example. So it is the government's law and order work is a PR. It's a PR strategy, and it's designed to be politically expedient and to gain votes. It's not backed by evidence, and it's not going to reduce crime at all, because it doesn't address the drivers of crime or help to rehabilitate people who have created harm and do need to be held accountable. But none of this will do that.
Chewy.
I think you're exactly right. We've said this about this government time and time again, and I would imagine that we're going to continue to say it, that there's two things that they keep looping back to. What is the problem that they are trying to solve? And in almost all cases, the problem is we want to be the government, and now it's we want to stay the government. It's not about solving crime. That is a side effect of the machine that they've created, and it means that it's a feature, not a bug, right? And then the other thing is, you might as well tack on, we have ignored all advice on whatever policy it is. Like if prisons were a solution, the problem would be solved, because we've done big prisons, we've done harsh punishment, crime continued, and at no point have we really tried, has any government really tried to break the wheel that creates the cycle of crime? And it's with the kids. It's with the kids in the communities that the kids are in. If dad goes to prison, you can pretty much start taking betting odds at that point that the kid is going to end up in prison sometime in the next 10, 20, 25 years. And it's no way to be. It's expensive. It doesn't make anybody safer. So why do we keep just trying it again?
And if I can jump in, if that's all good. And this is why I'm not really interested in him talking about like whose fault it is, because like even the gang policy, and in that interview he goes, he's trying to say, we're cracking down on gangs are gonna be miserable, blah blah. It's crazy that we literally just had the apology, the report into the Royal Commission inquiry into abuse in state care. And one thing that we found there was a report that came out in 2019, and it was from the chief science advisor to the Prime Minister, trying to understand the factors of minimizing gang harm and like what drives membership to gangs and stuff like that. And it was found that 80 to 90% of gang members were abused in state care. And it's like, you want to know who's responsible or whose fault it is that we have gangs? It's the state. The Crown is directly responsible for that. And what I'm nervous about is that they're trying to create this moral panic around gangs, they're picking a very small part of our society to blame for law and order issues, whether that's, like you said, Chewy, our rangatahi, or whether it's gang members, without even attempting to understand what drives people to feel that they have to commit crime in the first place, and what totally messed up circumstances those people have been through in their life that might have attributed to that crime. And the other problem, sorry to go on a tangent, but the other problem is they're completely removing the ability for judges to be able to take those things into consideration. So there's like obviously this separation of power in New Zealand, where the people that make the law shouldn't reach too far into the judiciary and how judges apply sentences and appropriate courses of action for rehabilitation. But they're just completely removing any ability for the judge to actually say, hold up, I've got this person in front of me. They've been, subject to severe family violence, all sorts of trauma. They've got a disability. They're mentally unstable. They are completely poor. All the things that we see reflected in our prison population, and they've removed that because they're like, nah, we're not going to look at the evidence. We're not going to take a course of action that addresses people's circumstances and helps to address harmful behavior and attitudes. We're just going to lock them up for longer. And again, like you said, Chewy, creates that vicious cycle of people being caught up in that justice system for their entire lives.
We had the quintessential, the perfect example of the ignoring the research last night, when there was an article talking about 100 experts around the world say to this government, if you increase the speeds on the roads, people will die. And Simeon Brown goes, no, I don't agree with him. And that's it. End of conversation. So they're doing it. So there can't be a clearer example of how anything to do with the research or best practice or longitudinal studies just gets, or like a cultural report like you're talking about, just gets thrown out the window from these guys.
Totally. And a prime example of that is Mark Mitchell, as you guys like to say.
Mark Mitchell.
There was a report that came out a couple of weeks ago, and it basically said, it was an independent report, and they worked with police, and they're like, all right, there's an issue here. There is systemic bias and systemic racism within the police. And the police commissioner was like, okay, I accept the evidence. We need to build up trust with communities where there is no trust for the police. But the minister is like, nah, that's not true. Systemic racism, systemic bias, that doesn't exist, even though the evidence was right in front of his face. So they don't just ignore the evidence, they deny the evidence, even if it's public service evidence, whether it's research done independently, they just don't give a stuff about evidence, period.
I'd like to know, like, when all the Greens go and have lunch in the Greens lunchroom, when you guys heard Paul Goldsmith saying, Nazi emblems are fine, terrorist emblems are fine, but gangs we're going to crack down on, did you guys all spit your green tea out like the rest of us did?
100%. It just shows that, again, it's the cherry picking, It's the cherry picking and trying to just totally persecute a group of people who, we know what will reduce gang membership, and it's not this. And slipping those changes in that mean that what people have in their house, they're subject to greater searches from police, or could be subject to searches by police. It's just like, read the evidence, bro. Like, yeah.
I was thinking as well, maybe you have an answer to this, because we've been questioning it. They keep talking about, and Luxon said it in that clip, 500 more police, 500 more police. Do we know if it's 500 more police or 500 additional police? Because if like 700 police officers left the police force, but they got 500 in, it would be down by 200, but they would have been able to tick that box. Do you have any understanding as to which it was? Because if there's 3,000 police now, I don't know the exact number, I would expect their target to be hit, meaning there'd be 3,500 police, but there seems to be a little bit of wiggle room for them there. Do you have any idea?
I know the numbers are cooked, and the way that they're being presented is not accurate in terms of recruiting new police officers. And I can understand it. Like, first of all, there's the issues with how much police officers get paid, and then they're being expected to implement these laws that the government is putting in place. And I said that to the minister. I was like, do you really expect a new police officer who's on a crappy pay to go up to a patch gang member and ask them to remove their patch. Like, it's just not going to happen. So, yeah. And anyway, even if that was the case, more police officers, again, does not necessarily address the issue, because police intervene once harm has happened. But there's a whole lot of stuff that you have to do in the preventative space to actually address the drivers of crime. And my understanding about Auckland CBD, like that particular situation, is that crime may have reduced, but that's not just solely because there are more police officers. That's also a testament to the work that community organisations have been doing to do the prevention mahi, to provide services to people who are in the inner city who are struggling. Like, and here in Wellington even, we've had an increase in beat patrol police officers. And I went for a walk around a couple of weeks ago just to talk to people who are rough sleeping and are in the street community. And heaps of them have left because they're intimidated by the increased police presence, you know? And because when they leave their spot, all their stuff gets thrown out. And so they're like, well, not going to stay here. So it's just displacing the problem. It's displacing people, and that's not like, it's not solving the reasons that crime happens in the first place. And more police officers does not necessarily equate to a safer city.
Right. No, but it does equate to vibes, right? Because your average voter is out there going, now I see police doing the beat, and I don't see homeless people that inconvenience my day. So big tick. You know, you're right. It's you know, we've got more police on the beat now to crack down on retail crime, and they've deprioritized family harm to do it.
They've reduced court. Exactly. They've got the appearance of safety because people can more visibly see police officers. But like you say, they've completely reduced the amount that police can respond to family violence call-outs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard in one of the conversations today them talking about, technically central Auckland's numbers may have gone down, but if you look like one suburb outside of central Auckland, they've all gone up. So all they've really done is just push it out a few suburbs, and it's continued on. Tamatha, thanks so much for joining us. I do have one other question, but it's a bit off topic. Hopefully you'll be okay with it. We had a bit of a conversation last night about Māori Language Week, and we were like, well, I was like, I want to drag Chewy into my terrible thoughts. I was like, you know, New Zealand Music Month, Māori Language Week. Does that mean we are like, you know, music's 4 times as important as Māori language? Is Māori Language Week a bit of tokenism, or do you think it's an important tool to kind of continue the growth and acceptance of the Māori language?
I'm definitely not an expert, but I do think there's some importance in this week, because during this week it's often the anniversary of the Pitiana Reo Māori, the Māori language petition that entrenched all sorts of good stuff, like around kura kaupapa and making te reo Māori an official language, and all sorts of really good stuff came from that petition. And like, it's nice to acknowledge and recognise that every year, and that was back in like 1972. So it's good to remember that te reo endures despite some of the ideological vitriol and racism that comes from different governments. So yeah, and I don't want to bag New Zealand Music Month as a New Zealand music fan, but I do think it's really quite cheap to see, you know, the government making TikToks and social media posts being like, oh, it's Wiki o Te Reo Māori, while also completely policing and reducing the use of Te Reo Māori throughout the public sector, making cuts to Whakaata Māori, the only Reo Māori broadcaster in Aotearoa, and just continuing their complete attack, ideological attack on Te Reo and on Māori and on Te Tiriti, and, you know, te continue. But yeah, I would love for every week to be with your Te Reo Māori, But I do think there's a significance in us just stopping to reflect on the history and how far Aotearoa has come, despite a lack of support from the Crown.
You beat me to it a little bit. I was going to show you both guys one of Luxo's tweets today and see if you wanted to respond to it. Te reo is a language I wish I knew more of. In fact, both Amanda and myself have worked at it for over the years, both taking lessons to learn and improve. In New Zealand, we're lucky to have this language, and I'm glad to celebrate it. Happy Māori Language Week. Kia kaha te reo Māori. As you say, whilst we've got a cultural minister who wants to remove Māori language out of matariki invitations, and a government removing Māori words out of all their official documentation as much as they can, I mean, it sticks in my craw. What do you guys think?
Well, even with the interview that we started the show with, Morena, Mr. Prime Minister, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning. Could have responded in kind. Would have been such a gimme. Didn't think it was important enough. One thing that I would point out, people can do this in their own time. They can look up David Seymour's little video that he put out this week. My spine disappeared from cringe. It went to another place where I wasn't, because it was the cringiest video that I have ever seen. But he used more reo in that than I have seen Luxon use ever. So maybe I've got to give it to him.
Just before we come in, Tamatha, I'll just say one thing. This is I don't mean to sound graphic, and this might kind of offend some people. It's like there's an abusive husband still giving his wife a flower on Valentine's Day. That's kind of how it feels. These bastards who are just kind of pushing down. I started writing some things down as you were talking. They want to have more prisoners. They're getting rid of Māori Health Authority, the firearms laws, tax cuts, cancelled the ferries, attack on today. All these things are going. And then they're going, hey guys, let's all get together and celebrate Māori language. I hate it. It's revolting.
Yeah. Exactly. That I was basically going to say the same thing. Like, not really interested in what politicians do in their individual life. Like, cool, that's awesome that you're taking lessons, but that means nothing when you are leading a government that's completely attempting to undermine te reo Māori. Like, yeah. Thoughts and prayers, like.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I would have a ton more respect for someone that says, look, I don't know any. I don't know any. It's too late. But what I can do is make sure that it's not too late for everybody else.
Yeah, for my grandkids.
We're going to put a focus of this in the schools, that sort of thing. Because it can come off really tokeny.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Tamatha, thanks so much for joining us tonight, giving up some of your precious time whilst you're in Parliament. Really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you. And the chat has been all nothing but fantastic. You're amazing. So thank you for being a part of what we're doing tonight. Appreciate you giving us some time.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me. See you on the next one.